How I Learned System Design. It's an article written by Himanshu Singh on his Medium. And I'm interested in reading this. I'm always interested in getting the big picture of things. And system design is of course an important part of it, part of the software engineering. So I'm interested in reading this. The honest journey from total confusion to clarity. Let me be brutally honest with you. There was a time I used to skip every video or blog that said system design. I would think, this is for senior engineers, architects, not for me. I was wrong. Because one day in an interview they asked me, can you design a ride-sharing app like Uber? And I froze. If someone asked me that, I'll be frozen too. I talked about REST APIs, I mentioned MySQL, then silence. No clue how to handle scale, no idea about quick queues, or even how to store real-time location. That day I decided this won't happen again. Here's how I went from being totally lost to confidently discussing architecture in interviews and even proposing better design at work. First, I accepted I knew nothing and that was okay. System design is intimidating at first. People throw words like sharding, CQRS, load balancer, eventual consistency. At first it made me feel dumb, but then I realized everyone feels lost in the beginning. This is 100% true. Everyone, even the very, very, very experts, they start from zero. System design isn't a single topic. It's not a chapter you can complete in a week. It's a mix of how data flows, how services talk to each other, how systems survive under huge traffic, and how to make things fault tolerant, fast, and reliable. Once I accepted that this will take time, it felt lighter. I stopped chasing perfection and focused on small wins. I think that's a really good mindset in general. Number 2, I broke down system design into mini topics. System design is not one big subject, it's a set of interconnected building blocks. So I made a map for myself. This is nice, really nice that he shares this with us because this is super useful. A, the basics. What happens when you type a URL in the browser? What is a DNS, load balancer, CDN, TCP versus UDP, HTTP versus HTTPS. Even these basics were eye-opening. Like, did you know DNS is like a phone book of the internet and CDNs are why YouTube loads fast? Luckily, I know most of these. CDN I am not that familiar of, but other than that, yeah. B, data and storage. SQL versus NoSQL, indexing, replication, sharding, when to choose MongoDB versus PostgreSQL. I learned this the hard way. In one project we chose Mongo for transactional data. Later we regretted it. I know Mongo gets a lot of hate, and I don't know why. I would be interested to know why we chose Mongo for transactional data. Is it not ideal for transactional data? I don't know. Scaling techniques. Horizontal versus vertical scaling, caching, Redis, Memcached, load balancing, round robin, IP hashing. I loved this part. It made me feel like I could finally design something for millions of users even if it was just on paper. Architecture patterns, monolith versus microservices, event-driven architecture, pub, sub, message queues, Kafka, RabbitMQ. This made me understand why companies like Netflix use microservices, not just because it's trendy, but because it makes sense at scale. These topics I have zero idea about. Number 3, I watched real people think, not just tech. Instead of watching tutorial style videos, I started watching mock interviews, and trust me, that changed everything. Because when someone thinks out loud, makes mistakes, backtracks, and justifies their choices, you learn how to think, not just copy. Channels that really helped. Gaurav Sen explains from the ground up, Exponent mock interviews with real candidates, Byte Go Visual storytelling approach. I learned how to ask the right clarifying questions, define functional and non-functional requirements, walk through API design, the choices, scaling logic, always talk about trade-offs, not just choices. Number 4, I started drawing even if it's just on paper. One surprising thing that helped me, drawing. There's an example here, CQRS. So CQRS, command query, read stack, okay, command stack, write model, read stack, query. I mean, this is really neat drawing. Is this really done by hand? But anyways, I get the point. I'm not an artist, but sketching out a flow from client, load balancer, app servers, and the database made it click. When I drew, the request flow felt real. I saw where bottlenecks could happen. I understood where to place a cache, when to use a queue. Even today, when I'm stuck, I grab a pen and paper. The sketch often gives me the clarity that reading never did. I'm the same. I'm a very much a visual learner. Number 5, I practiced with real system design problems. Once I was confident with basics, I stopped watching and started designing. Here's how I practiced. Pick a real-world problem, real-world system like WhatsApp, YouTube, Zomato, Instagram. Write the functional requirements first, what the system should do. Then add non-functional requirements, scale, availability, and latency. Do rough estimation, users, QPS, DB size. Design a high-level architecture. Go deeper into database schema, APIs, scaling strategies, handling failures, edge cases. I wrote one design per week, and not just one solution but multiple possibilities, because in real interviews and real jobs there's rarely one perfect answer. It's all about just justifying why you picked X over Y. I applied it at work. Theory is useless unless you apply it. At work, I was working on a high traffic service for EMI generation. It had Kafka events, REST APIs, complex transactions. This is where I started applying design principles. I proposed breaking a monolith into services, used queues for async communication, introduced retries and dead letter queues, and even debated Kafka versus gRPC based on latency and control. It wasn't perfect, but it gave me confidence that system design isn't just interview stuff, it's real, valuable skill that helps your team and your product. That's awesome. I think this is why people that consistently learn just can't be replaced at work, and they bring so much value at work. I started explaining to others. This was the final level. When you explain something, be it to a junior, an intern, or in a blog, you spot the gaps in your own understanding. So I mentored juniors during onboarding, took small sessions to explain caching, database design, and queues, wrote articles with diagrams, started preparing juniors for design interviews. Every time I explained something, I realized if I can teach it simply, I actually understand it well. I 100% agree with that. My honest advice to you, if you're starting today, or if you failed in your first design interview, I want you to tell you this. System design is not magic. You don't need 10 years of experience. You don't need to memorize Gaurav Sans diagrams. You just need to start with basics, think in real-world use cases, build a structure, practice weekly, ask why behind every choice, and slowly improve. Even if you give 30 minutes daily in 3 months, you'll see the difference. 100%. Again, a quote I like is, people overestimate how much we can get done in a day, and people underestimate how much we can get done in a year. So always a long-term investment. Final thoughts. It's not about answers, it's about approach. In system design, you'll often feel uncertain. That's normal. What matters is how you approach a problem. When you explain what's the scale, what's the bottleneck, what are the trade-offs of this database versus that one. What if this service fails? That's what makes you a strong engineer, not the number of diagrams you memorized. So keep going. Start with how does a URL work, and end with designing Instagram. You'll be amazed at how far you've come one system at a time. That's awesome. That's a super insightful article, and it's really motivating to see that there are people like Himanshu who is really interested in learning and who's very motivated and very passionate. It's always cool to see that. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe. Bye.